Hi, my name is Dean Chessman, and today we're going to be doing another deep dive into blob trackers and tracers using TouchDesigner. Let's get started. I'm going to start out with my video file already here. I got this off of Pexels, and it's just a nice big HD, actually 4K video of a bunch of cars driving. In fact, I think this is too big, so I'm going to res it down. So I'm going to add a resolution top, and I'm going to drop it down. Let's see, by half. Yeah, let's do 1280 by 720. To get this menu, you can middle click to see this information. Okay, and then I'm also going to do, I want this to be a vertical video. It's shot overhead, so it shouldn't matter. So if I do a flip flop from the bottom left, I get this in vertical mode. And then I'm going to put this into a null, so that way, you know, if I want to replace what the video is, I can reference it by this video null later. Great. So the next thing I want to do is build up my my motion tracker, so I can take the parts of this image and detect where the motion is happening. So I'm going to do that with a cache top first. I'm going to drop the size down to 2, and I'm going to make the output index -1. I'm just remembering one thing I forgot as well. So this movie file is it's a 30 frames per second movie file. And I can either come in and do interpolate frames, or actually for this one, what I'm going to do is change my frame rate to be 30. So that way, maybe I should actually show what the difference is of that. So, okay, so I've got my cache on -1 and 2. And if I bring this into a difference chop, or difference top, sorry, I get this nice smooth image. So if I change this back to 60 frames a second, I'll get this sort of flickeriness that'll happen. And I don't want that. I want it nice and smooth so that my blobs are consistent when I get to my blob tracking. Okay, so now I've got this difference calculation that's looking at the difference between the different frames, which gives me the most motion. I'm going to, before I put that into a threshold, I'm going to blur it. And I want these to kind of start looking a little blobby, and then put that into a threshold. So these are settings that if you're using a different video, you'll have to tweak a little bit until you get what you want. But so I've set my blur, and then I'm bringing my threshold down until it seems like, you know, I want to be getting the individual vehicles and cars, but I don't want to be getting a bunch of this sort of extra junk from little like movements of the camera that are happening. Yeah, but I want to have all these individual cars driving by. So that looks pretty good to me. Let's take this now into my blob tracker. So into the blob track. If you have just the free version of TouchDesigner, this is only going to track, I think, you know, what is the default, like 3 at a time. My blob tracker tool that I made does have a method that tracks multiple, but it doesn't actually do the size of the blob. It just kind of you know, puts a point on different parts that are found on the screen. But so the commercial version or the pro version will give you as many blobs as you want. So let's change my blob color here just so I can see it a little better to red, so I can change my options as well. So inside my blob track, I can go in and I'm not really getting a lot of blobs right now. So let's see if I can fix that. So maybe my minimum blob size. Yeah, if I bring that down, I start to get squares on pretty much everything. Let's see, I might want to bring it up a couple notches just to, yeah, that's probably fine. Again, this is an option that you can probably play with a bit. Okay, and another thing I'm going to do with my blob track here, if I middle click on it and I look at it, this is taking up, you know, a decent amount of cook time. I'm getting about 8 milliseconds on the CPU and GPU. I'm on a MacBook Pro M3 Max, and so it's handling this okay. But like, if you're not on as good of a machine, or if you're doing this, you know, on something that's using more resolution or something, you might want to bring this down. And one of the ways you can do that is with the second input on the blob track, and that's just looking for an input of what the background background image that these blobs are being found on top of. And so I'm going to go in, and since really the background of just this threshold is a blank screen, I'm going to bring in a constant, and I'm going to bring the alpha to 0, so I just have that blank background screen, and then drag that in. And then if I look at this now, I brought my time down to less than half of what the calculation time was. And yeah, so something that I haven't done as much before, but it is the thing that'll speed things up as far as how they run. Okay, so next thing I want to do, I'm going to take a look at what my different blob track data is. So this table gets made from my blob tracker automatically. I can just toggle it visible here, and it's got each of my blobs, their U and V position, the width and height in sort of UV values, like 0 to 1 values. If they're active right now, if they've expired, how long they've been on screen, that sort of thing. And the idea here is, just keeps counting up. Eventually, if you just leave this running forever, especially with this many blobs, it's going to maybe even get up to like the 15,000 like limit range, which you might run into problems with. So every once in a while, it might make sense for you to come in and into the blob tracker and hit reset just to get these back to 0. All right, so what are we going to do now? So look at my previous notes here a little bit. Okay, so we want to be able to take this image and draw our own squares. Let's just do that basic sort of blob track effect. So let's draw the data from here. So that way, instead of having these blobs and the squares on them, what we get by default over here, let's create our own. So let's take this dat to a dat to chop, and inside the parameters of the dat to chop, the first row and here is my names, and the first column has data in it. So I want to say it's values, and then I want to say channel per column because I want to have each of these as my different data sets. So there we go. So I've got all my different channels for each of the columns in that blob tracker. Okay, I want to first adjust for the aspect ratio. So I'm going to bring in a math, and I'm only going to have this math context be for the U value, and I'm going to multiply it by the ratio I have for whatever this video is. And I'm going to do this with a little snippet of code just to keep it dynamic for when I change out that video. So let me stretch this out here so you can see it as I do it. So I'm going to reference the op that I named video, the null that I made that's called video, and say dot width divided by the op video dot height. And so this is because the U and the V values, the U and V values are just 0 to 1 no matter what. So the 0 to 1 values here are going to go less far than here, right? So I'm making this to make up for that in my render that I'm going to do here with my instancing network. Okay, I'm going to take that into a null, and I'm going to call this blobs. Okay, let's go ahead and build our render network here. I'm going to use the rectangle SOP, not top. Rectangle SOP. I'm going to bring that, drag out, and hit tab to get my geometry and make this connection. This is something a lot of people ask me for. If you drag out from a SOP first and then hit tab to add the geo, it'll automatically give you this input here. Then let's see, for the material, I'm going to go with a line, drag it on top, bring in a camera, set that view to orthographic and bottom left, and the ortho width, I'm actually going to use that same ratio value that I used here. So I'm going to copy that from my math. I'm actually going to rename this math too, so I know it's in the future. And then go back to my camera. I'm going to paste that value back in. So I've got that same for the camera. Ortho width needs to be op video dot width and op video or divided by op video dot height. Okay, so what's next? Let's go ahead and add our render. And I'm going to want this render to be the same size as my video. So in my resolution of my render under the common tab, I'm going to say op video dot width for the width and op video dot height. Okay, so now my render is the same size as the video. I'm going to drag this to and out. I'm going to right click and hit view, I'm gonna shrink it down, drag it up to my top left here so I can get a preview of any changes I'm making going forward. Okay, let's set up our instancing inside the geo, turn on the instancing on the instancing tab, and first I'm going to drag this blobs into my, I'm going to use my default instance ops because I'm going to use this for multiple of these. So I know that my translate X is going to be the U value, the Y is going to be the V, and then the scale, I'm going to use the width, and the scale Y is going to be the height. Okay, awesome. So already I've got pretty much, I've replicated what's happening here. Oh, and I'm noticing one thing I didn't do is I need to also multiply the width value times my aspect ratio. So I can just do that in that same math aspect ratio scope. I can just add the width. There we go. So now these should be matching up size-wise. Looks good. Okay. So obviously, you know, this is, well, let's do like with a basic thing. So let's select here. I'm just gonna pull over this video. Where are we at? Where is it at? This video null. I'm gonna select it over here. So I'm just gonna type in video in my select parameter, and let's put this over the top. Sorry, put it over the top of this. No, I had it right the first time. That is going over this. Great. Okay, so now I'm getting my white lines. So let's change our color just to make things a little more easy to see. So near color, I'm going to say red, and I'm going to make my width and far distance the same. So I'm going to drag this width near to width far and reference it so I can tweak it, and it'll just change both of them. Okay, so now we've got red boxes. I don't really want these to hug as tightly around the car, so I'm actually going to add another math in here. And I'm going to call this math box size. And inside the scope, I'm going to select the width and the height. And then I'm going to use this now to multiply the size of the boxes a little bit. So I want to kind of surround it. So I think the end effect I want to have from this one is that sort of like security tracking footage, right? And I don't want it to be so tight around that box. Cool. So added that in, added a little multiplier there to change my size. Great. What else could we do with this? One of the things that I was playing around with is this idea that maybe if this was like, you know, simulating some sort of like surveillance kind of footage thing, maybe we want inside the boxes to zoom in on that movement inside the box. And I found a kind of fun way that can be done. So I'm gonna actually do that by, let's see, I'm rendering the same things here. So I'm gonna duplicate my geo and my rectangle, but I'm gonna make a new constant top. That's gonna be the material for this guy. You'll see that's already reflecting because my camera and render are automatically bringing in all the geos it sees on the same context. But then, so how am I going to get this to zoom? I'm going to use some sort of UV mapping. It's not going to be perfect, but we can get a similar sort of effect that we're going to want. So I'm going to make a quick UV map with my favorite GLSL method of just copying this VUVST down to this bottom row, and then 0. So what this is doing is saying, give me the red and green value based on like the position in this image. Make the blue 0, make the alpha 1. So this is what we get. So do that real quick, and then since this is going from 0 in this corner to 1 to this way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this and I'm going to add it onto a UV map of this entire space and add this UV map on top of this. And I'm going to reduce the amount of it a bit so that it's essentially taking pixels from a smaller range and pushing it out to a wider range. So if that doesn't make sense, I'll get to it here in a sec. So I'm going to add first a math afterwards, and I'm going to change this from being a range from 0 to 1 to being, let's let's do this negative 0.5 to 0.5, or let's actually just do negative 1 to 1. Okay, great. So now we've got negative numbers here. We've got a 0 in the middle, and then 1, 1, negative 1. So that'll come into handy here in a second. I'm going to do this, call this math center 0, because then I'm going to have another math I know after this that's going to be a reduce, or kind of like knocking down the value, because I don't want it to be a full 1 UV, because that's the entire width of the whole UV map. All right, I'm going to put that in a null. I'm going to call this UV texture. I'm going to drag it onto my constant. Okay, so now I'm getting this fun UV map. Okay, now at this point I actually want a different render, right? So right now I'm rendering all my geometries on this one render, but I want to separate my outlines from this UV thing that I'm doing here. So let's just, instead of rendering all geometries, let's render this one with geo1, so just this geo. And then we'll make another render down here. And we'll have this reference geo2. So now I've got my nice little UV maps. And with that, I'm going to, let's see, I also want to copy over the values for the width and heights here. Okay, getting closer. And then I'm going to copy my GLSL UV map here, and I'm going to reference it here just to get the size, and then I'm going to put this over the top, or no, sorry, I'm going to add this. So I'm going to add these values to this. Okay, and these are going to be way too high, so I'm going to go ahead and knock this math reduce down quite a bit. So let's go from multiply to 0.01 even, so like a 1/100th of the size for the box. And you don't see a lot here, but if you look at the normalized values, they're still happening. Okay, and this is actually a good reminder, because they're looking a little choppy here. So I can go into like my advanced render, I can turn off dithering. I can also make sure that my output is 32-bit RG. I only care about the RG values. So now these are also only RG values. And okay, that's looking good. I think I also need to do the same thing over here. Make sure the texture is 32 RG. Okay, now we're getting nice, smooth, full gradients. That's great. Okay, so now that I've got this UV map, I want to remap it from this original video image. So let's bring this into a remap and bring in, this is our UV points, and start to see what we got. So let's see, it's looks like at this point we're maybe shrinking it down. So I think instead of, I could either probably subtract that, or I can also just go into my math reduce here and say like a negative 0.01. Let's see if that's, so yeah, so now we see we're like getting like zoomed in on these cars. And like the problem here is that like I'm using that full UV map, so like the smaller cars get zoomed up even more than, and the big cars look kind of okay, but, or maybe if I do 0.005, that's maybe getting closer to the effect I want, where we kind of a zoom in on the bigger cars, a better zoom in on the little like motorcycles and guys showing up. But yeah, we'll just leave it like that for now. And then instead of this over being my original selected video, I'm gonna put it over my new UV mapped pixel. So let's change this a little more, just so we can obviously see what's happening here. Maybe I'll even make my blobs just a little bit bigger even. Okay, that's cool. Let's see, let's do the kind of classic thing as well. Let's add the text overlay. So let's add the text top first, and then we'll talk about how this works again. I did this in my last video, but I think it's still a little tricky for people to understand totally what's happening. But so a text top, you can either go in and type a custom text in like the text input, or you can have whatever the text is here driven by this specification dat. And so if I right click on that and look at parameter help, it lets you specify things. The text is by pixel. That's important because our information is in UV right now. And then the headers must include position 1 or X, position 2 or Y, and text. So I need a column in a dat table with X, a Y, and a text. So let's work on building that. So first of all, I want to make the size of this the same as my video. So I'm going to, again, put op video dot width and op video dot height. And then, okay, then I need to get these values into here. I need to get them converted to pixel space. So let's see, the way I want to do that, I'm going to use this dat2. Yeah, I'm going to use this dat2. I'm going to select it first just to give me kind of a clean line here. Let's bring this down below. This is my end, and I'm going to put it in. So, okay, so I've got, for my text, I'm going to use the ID, and then for the X and Y position, I'll use the U and V. So let's just get those values just to clean this up a little bit. And let's do some math on these. So the U value, I want to turn this into an X pixel value. So I'm going to select in the scope of this just the U value, and then I'm going to multiply it by op video dot width. Okay, so now my U values are bigger. Do the same thing. So I'm going to do, let's rename this so I can know what it is later. So U to pixels, and then let's do another math. Do another one and do math V to pixels, and let's, in the context or the scope, let's do just the V, and then multiply this times op video dot height. Okay, so now I've got my U and V values, and then I'll leave my ID the same. Let's do a rename to, let's see, I first one I'm going to keep, oh no, the first one's going to be text, the second one's going to be X, and the third one's going to be Y, because that's what they said it wants in the table. Let's put it in a null. Let's rename the null to text dat info, and then let's convert this back to a dat. So chop2, and let's include the names. So we've got text, X, and Y. So I think if I did this right, it's going to work. So let's call this text spec dat, and let's drag that into our specifications dat. Okay, great. That's looking good. Looks like it's probably in the right place. Let's adjust some options here. I'm gonna go with kind of like a basic courier. Oh, I clicked in instead. Let's do courier new. Yeah, okay. And let's shrink it down a bit. I'm also gonna make this red as well. And yeah, I think that's probably good. So let's put another over here, and this one's actually going to go in the top. This one's going to the bottom. Okay, so now I have, floating along in the middle of my boxes, a nice piece of text with the ID actually for each of the blobs. Okay, maybe I'll change my text back to white actually, so it stands out a little bit. Okay, what else could we add to this? We can go add trace points again. And now we got so many blobs here. I think it could be fun to do some traces, but then have them kind of like only go between a certain amount of them. So let's select a chop with our blob data. Oh, don't I pause? With our blob data. And I want to get just a subsection of this. So I'm going to splice out a section of this. And I don't want it to be the same pieces all the time. So, well, yeah, let's splice it out first, and then I can kind of show you what I mean. So I'll leave it unchanged at this point. So the splice isn't doing anything right now. But I take this null, and then I'm going to convert it into a SOP. And okay, I need to tell it what the input data is for my SOP. So my channel scope, like what the input is I'm just going to use my U and V data, and that's going to translate to the P0, P1. I'm going to get rid of this P2. That'll get rid of that warning. Okay, so now I'm like drawing lines to every single blob right now. That's going to be just a mess if I draw it on top of all this. So the splice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to only output a trimmed section from the slice. So I'm going to turn that on. See, that took me to 0. And now I can just take a certain section of this and trim out that many. So if I want, you know, let's say, yeah, 15 points, I can say trim those, start splicing those out starting from whatever ID, and then, you know, I can trim through them. But you've noticed, you know, if I get too high, it'll go past how many are available. So I can change that start to be a fraction, and then should, as long as I stay under, sorry, maybe is it under 1? Yeah. Wait, what are we doing here? Yeah, so we're getting about 100 right now. So if I start moving, yeah, so that's sliding through. You can kind of see it moving back and forth a little bit there. So that's what I want. So what I want here, I'm going to automate this moving between, you know, 0 and, let's say, you know, 80%. So let's make a, let's do it as a noise chop. And then I want the amplitude, I want it to be kind of 0.85 divided by 2, because that's how high and below I want it to go for my offset of 0.5. So that's going to start at 50% and kind of move up and down and splice out sections of those samples there, right? So to actually get this to work, I need to go to com and hit splice or time slice. And so this value should be kind of going between, you know, the 20.2% to 0.8. So let's drink that on to the start. Okay, so you can kind of see it'll like start scrolling. It'll keep some of the lines drawing the same because the blobs track and like stay on the screen for a certain amount of time. Okay, so now let's render these. So this again gets into its own geo. So we got geo 3 now. And we also want to have its own line material. Actually, let's copy the one from above. So I copied my line from above, drag that on here, and let's make this one white. And then we're gonna need, let's see, is there one that we could render this with? We could just render this along with this render here. So let's add Geo 3 to our render 1. And then we get our lines drawing. Cool. So we can go in and update our thickness of the line as well if we want it to be more pronounced, like what's going on. Another thing we can try to do, if I put this into a null, hopefully this doesn't crash my system here, because sometimes when you try to convert SOPs, things get a little messy. I'm going to, let's try and convert this to like a curve instead. So if I convert it to like a, let's see, let's start with a polygon and change it to nerves curve. There we go. Might be an effect you're interested in. For now though, I'm going to stick with the straight lines though. Just giving you options there. Let's see, what else could we add to this to do something cool? We might also do a same sort of splice. Maybe I'll use this same spliced out section to draw some squares, but then like fill them in, or maybe we like invert that section. So let's just copy our geo up here that's already drawing rectangles. Let's bring it down, and then instead of the line, we're going to do a constant just to just a white constant. And then let's give this its own render and put it in GO3. We need to change the resolution again. So op video width. Op video height. Okay, so we got, oh, I did GO3 instead of GO4. Let's do that. Okay, so now I've got my whites. And then I need to, instead of using my instancing of the blobs, I want it to be from this spliced set of chops. So now I'm only getting, you know, a subset of blobs every time. And then, you know, I can bring that into my output over here with a difference maybe. So let's put it in a composite just in case we want to change what type of composite we want to do. But so we have that in there. So even that on its own is kind of cool. You know, you could add this, you know, add a switch that like switches between a bunch of these different inputs, you know, so like maybe make it auto reactive to switch to this view. Then we could go to maybe a difference view. And so like it inverts just those ones that are being selected with the lines. You know, you could also do like, I don't know, like a hard light or something. I guess that's not that interesting. Just a simple overlay. Maybe if you wanted to color what that constant was on top. I'm gonna stick with difference for now because I like that sort of contrast look. Yeah, so lots of different options here of things you could do with the blob tracker and these sort of traces happening. The text also, you know, you could customize what's going into those text values, maybe also like limit what text is showing up. Maybe you use the splice values of the texts instead of showing it for every single one. Yeah, anyway, I'd love to see what you guys make of this. Definitely play with it, and I will make this project file available to my Patreon supporters, and the link for that is down below. And also, I am a freelance TouchDesigner developer, so if you have projects that you're interested in hiring for, definitely hit me up. I'm definitely down to talk about any projects you could potentially use help with. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. We'll see you at the next one.